Okay, so today I have with me Guy Schweitzer. For those of you who don't know Guy, he has done so many different milers like Glasshouse, GNW, G-Sur. He's done UTA, Blackhole, Hounslow, the Buffalo Grand Slam. This year alone, he's done the Delirious 200 and recently just finished DU 135 for the second time in a row. Welcome, Guy.
Thanks, Christy.
So before we get way back into your background, I'd like to just find out a little bit more about your trail running experience and just how kind of it began, because you haven't actually been running that long, have you?
No, I used to hate running actually. So it probably started for me without going back to why I started running in 2009. I originally at that point saw a mate of mine or an old school friend was doing half Ironmans, and I thought, if he can do that, I can do that. And went from 0 to a half Ironman. That was my very first event that I ever did. And I sort of got the bug for doing long stuff at that point. And from there on, I just did triathlons. Then I went back and did really short triathlons straight after that. So I went from big to small, and got some fast stuff happening, and then sort of got to enjoy running, but really still wanted to ride the bike a lot. And then incidentally, my brother signed up to do a marathon, and I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Can't let my brother do something that I can't do. That was my mentality, and so I signed up for a marathon as well.
And did you realize at that point that you had a bit of running talent?
I did the Gold Coast Marathon, was the very first one in 2014. So there's a bit of a gap there in years of triathlon, playing around with triathlons, and then I did that. And I did a 3:17 for that marathon, and I was pretty happy with that. I didn't really know much about it. I looked up, for some reason, I decided to look up Boston and the qualifiers, and I thought, oh, that's only 7 minutes slower than what it needed to do to get into Boston. And so I thought to myself, I might go for Boston. And but at the same time, I'd already signed up to do a full Ironman at that point. And but then I had a crash on my bike, and I couldn't swim properly after the crash. And so I had to pull out of the Ironman, which wasn't so bad. It made me focus on qualifying for Boston. And so that was my next goal. And took me 2 or 3 marathons to get it. So then I qualified for Boston at Sunny Coast in late 2014. So it sort of all happened pretty quickly, if I remember rightly. And then I got so excited when I finished Sunny Coast that I thought, oh, there's these things called 100K events, and there was one that happened to be, there must have been an advert or something at the Sunny Coast Marathon for the Blackhole 100. And literally within a week of qualifying for Boston, I signed up for that.
And you'd never done a trail run before?
Never done a single trail run.
Why not do 100K?
Yeah.
A few months after.
That's right. And then even when and so I only had a few months to train, because I think it's in October from memory. And I went and I didn't do very many trail runs before the event. I just did a couple of really fire trails really. And but I went out and ran up some decent road hills and stuff, but really was sort of banking on my fast marathon times to get me through how wrong I was.
It's a very different beast, isn't it?
No, I mean, the 100K was so painful, and but I met some lovely people out there for the first time. It was nice to run with runners that would talk to you rather than the road stuff. I never really saw that. But out there, I met lots of great people who are still my friends today. But what sort of taught me a lesson is that there was runners there that, you know, were slower runners than me, but they would beat me. They'd come to the hills and I'd be crawling up the hills, and then they would be running up the hills or marching fast probably. And so I sort of thought, oh well, and I did a half decent time. I thought it took me 14 and a bit hours, and I thought, well, I think I can do that again, but I need to do hill training.
Yeah.
And so from then on, but after that, the focus was Boston, and I went on to do Boston a few months later,
and you smashed your time there.
Yeah, I went there to try and do first the goal was to do Boston. It happened to be a day before my a day before my 40th birthday, so it was like a birthday present for me. But I wanted a bit of an extra present. I wanted to go under 3 hours for the first time, and just everything clicked that day. It was freezing cold, pissing down rain, which I think helped me. I'm a heavy sweater and cramper, and the cold conditions really worked in my favour, and I managed to do 2:58, and probably to this day is probably still the highlight of all the running that I've done, and I've done some pretty cool stuff since. But in terms of feeling, and it was a really emotional experience. I was so happy that it just everything clicked that day, and I've not since done a sub 3 yet. I'd like to do one more, prove it wasn't a bit of a fluke, but yeah, I've just got to find the right time to do that.
But, amongst all your milers and 200 milers and crazy shit you do. That's
right, and it's so that's how I sort of got into trail running. My first event, pretty crazy, first event 100k. My first triathlon was a half Ironman, and then after that, I just sort of learnt a lot more about trails, and then just went out into the trails out the back of Brisbane where we live, and just really got to like it. And I was doing it solo for a long time, just out there on my own, and it's pretty lonely, but I didn't mind that. I've been like that for a long time, and but then it sort of stepped up a gear when I met some like-minded people.
So before we get into all that, I want to go back in time, because I don't think, to be as successful as you are, not only just in running, because you also have a very successful company that you run, and you're married, you have 3 kids. So I believe that they all go hand in hand. So I want to kind of go back in history. You've only really been running for, 8-9 years, and you've done some really significant things within Australia. So let's go back to, you as a teenage kid. You dropped out of high school, which I find unbelievable now, considering all that you've achieved in your life. So let's go back to that point, and I want to really unpick, were you always this obsessed? Did you always give everything 100%? Let's just unpick that a little bit. So
no, quite the opposite actually. So I was a shy kid, and I still like my own space. Some people might not think that I'm shy anymore, but I do really enjoy being on my own at times. But back then, I was never really an outgoing person. I was pretty good at schoolwork and naturally pretty smart. But I never ever, I'm going back to early high school, but I never really wanted to do events, different things, but unless I could go and win an event or something, I wouldn't sign up. So in the end, I never signed up or never trained for anything other than, when I was 15, I started doing bodybuilding and stuff, but I'll talk about that. But, so coming through high school, just pretty much just average kid, quiet, and I was a bit of a, I don't know, I did a lot of silly things when I was a teenager. I drank a lot when I was young, crazy when I think back at it now, but that's what I was doing, and getting into a bit of trouble, and just doing silly things. I look back at teenagers now and I just think, well, I was one of them, and anyway, it got to the point where I was 16, and a mate of mine, best mate at the time, he'd been kicked out of home for various things and ended up coming and living with us. Mum let him come and stay with us, and somehow between us we concocted this idea up to leave school, leave home, and so we did. At 16 we both left school. We left home and moved from Port Macquarie, which is sort of, down in New South Wales, and we both moved up to the Gold Coast and thought we knew it all, and that really changed everything for me. When I got to the Gold Coast, we lived in this little crappy unit, one bed, and I sit here, Christy, and I think, no, much bigger than your kitchen here. Was the size of our unit was terrible and dingy, and in a terrible part of town because we couldn't afford much. And so I was surrounded by, not that I got into it, but I was surrounded by similar crowd, drugs and people really with no hope in life, and I don't know how long I was there. I can't remember. It was 1991 or something like that. And over that course of me being there, my brain started to think, this is a crappy life, you know. I was working, earning some money, crappy money for that 16-year-old, but what can you expect? And, you know, and I just started to want to go home, you know. And I still remember ringing up Mum one day and ringing and say, I sort of had to swallow some pride, and she was kind enough to let me come back home, but she said, you're not coming home and doing nothing. And that really just changed everything. And I said, okay, I'll commit. I'll go to high school, back into school, 2 years out, back into school, and I'll work really hard. I still didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to go to high school and do really well. And so much so that I actually was given, the school gave me notes to catch up on stuff, so I wasn't coming back cold. So moved back home, went to school, back to school, and funnily enough, at 17, you know, I talked about the drinking, I was over it. By the time I was 18, most people are excited to go out and drink. I'd done it enough, and I just wasn't interested anymore. I was just focused on doing really well at school, and ended up doing really well at school. And then that just sort of led to other things, you know. I started to think, oh my God, I can actually go to uni and I can almost pick what I want to do, you know, and then I chose engineering out of a bunch of things, and then I suppose in terms of my mindset then, I'd had this period where I think people thought, you know, guy is a dropkick, you know, and I certainly know in the family that's what people thought, you know. And
bet you they don't think that now.
No, but you know, and I suppose for a long time I felt like I had to prove otherwise, you know, and certainly I don't know how long I felt like I was proving it for, but I would say until I was 30, I'd think, you know, I felt like I had to prove all the time, get people's approval that I wasn't the person I was when I was 16, and so I did really well at school, then went to uni. I was the first in our family to go to uni. I did really well at uni.
And were you bodybuilding at this time as well?
Yeah, so I was bodybuilding back then as well. So I wasn't absolutely doing nothing, but I really had a passion for lifting weights, and I really, I was actually, I suppose, the mentality you see in the way I do things now, I suppose, was probably showing out in my bodybuilding. I was obsessed by it.
And you did quite well at it as well, didn't you?
Oh, I did all right, yeah. Not as well as, I mean, I would have liked to have gone further with it, but to go further with it meant I had to do things to my body, which I suppose I was with my now wife, Sonia, at the time, and she wouldn't let me do. And in hindsight, I'm glad that she did that. But, you know, I would have had to do things, which at the time I was prepared to do, but had someone holding me back, and which was fine. And so I really loved it, loved the feeling of being strong and, you know, getting up on stage and doing that. And I kept on, you know, I probably did that, you know, in my mind seriously until I was in my early 20s, and then work sort of got in the way. I kept doing it, and I thought I'd do it until I was 60, you know. And
you loved running then too?
No, I hated running. I joined the Air Force at that point, which, you know, I had to run 3 times a week. I was paid to run, you know, and I hated it every time we had to go and run. Hated it with a passion, and but I did it because I had to, and yeah. So that's how I got to there, and I suppose that obsessive mindset was sort of born in the weightlifting. I was really obsessed by that, and I don't think at my career at that point, although I always knew at that time. A mate of mine, it was a bit of a joke at the time when we were at uni, we always used to go, I wonder who's going to earn $100,000 a year first. And so it sort of gives you a bit of an insight into how we were thinking, and that we were driven to do things. And so ultimately my work life and my obsession in my personal life sort of ran parallel together, and yeah, so really it all sort of turned at 16, I reckon. And even my own family, they say that was probably the worst decision you ever made, but it was also the best decision you ever made. And ironically or whatever, my best mate that I left school with at the time, Unfortunately for him, he didn't have a family to go home to. He's still on the Gold Coast.
Wow.
I honestly don't know how well or he's doing, but he's still there, and hopefully he's doing well for himself. I don't know.
Yeah, so you went from bodybuilding, and now I know some of your background, and randomly, just even a few weeks ago, I found out that you did a 300-kilometer bike around a track.
Yeah.
So these are the kinds of things, and you didn't even really train. Was it for like a charity or something? You just kept going and.
Yeah, so I suppose just before I say that, I guess to get from bodybuilding and into running, I was probably in my early 30s, I'd say, 10 years ago. Yeah, it had to be in my early 30s. And I, in my mind, I thought to myself, I'm going to give this bodybuilding a serious crack again, you know, and I got really right into it, and I was as strong as I'd ever been in my early 30s. And then I was, you know, one day I was doing a really heavy leg press, and I could feel a crack in my lower back, and I could hear something crack. It scared me, and I stopped. And then I think I had like a 9-week break before I was game enough to have another go. I got a little bit depressed, and then I went back and had another go, and I heard it crack again. And then I think I knew then that bodybuilding was done for me, you know, and lifting weights was done for me. And I was going 6 days a week religiously. And so it was like, oh my God, how can I just stop doing stuff? And that's when one of my old school friends I saw doing these half Ironmans. And I thought, well, and I bought a bike. It was a mountain bike at the time.
So even though you hated running, you thought, oh, I'll just go do a half Ironman.
Yeah, I just talked to a few people, and I started training for it with a mountain bike, you know, and then I sort of got into it and signed up for a half Ironman in Port Macquarie, and went and did that, and then I just got this bug for doing this long stuff. And to touch off what you were saying, you know, this is a bit further down the track, but you know, the 300k ride I did was it was for a Daniel Morecambe charity. It was a ride day out on a track in Brisbane there, and it was, you know, you had to sort of get sponsors, and you know, you'd say how many laps of this track you're going to do. I went there thinking I could possibly ride 300k's in a 12-hour from daylight to dusk, and I started in the dark. I finished in the dark just.
It was raining, wasn't it?
And it rained for 180 kilometres of it. I wouldn't know what my longest ride before that was, probably 100k. And I suppose if I think about it now, and I can't remember where it was in time, but I think it was probably my real first mental test, you know, one, to ride all day, and two, without having trained, and then two, to do most of it in the rain. And I think that sort of bode well for all of the crazy stuff that I decided to do after that, in terms of never giving up on things. So that's, I can't remember where in time that actually occurred, but it was
before you became a serious runner, though.
Yeah, it was after. It was still back in triathlon days.
Yeah.
I know it was, because I did it on a tri bike, on a TT bike, which is pretty uncomfortable for that long. But
and you also did 3 Peaks Challenge down in Victoria with no training, or
pretty
6
much
weeks training or something.
Yeah, so what happened there was, once again in time, I can't remember when it was, 2014 or somewhere around there, and my brother and my brother was into cycling at that point, and I think I was into running more then. I can't really remember, but anyway, one of the guys that was going with him had to pull out for some reason. It was about 6 weeks out, and he mentioned it to me, and I went, probably asked the wife at the time, could I go down there, and she said, yeah. And he went 230k's and through the Victorian Alps. Yeah, I can do that. And so I went down there. I tried to fit in a little bit of training. I might have done a 160k ride in there or something, but it wasn't. I didn't really do much. But I went down there and I had a blast. It was fun, and gave my brother a touch up.
I was going to say, should we say that on here? He'll probably listen to this.
Yeah, I think he was a bit surprised, but that made me smile. And but in the end, Andrew and I, Andrew's my brother. I sort of to halfway, I sort of left him behind, and then I thought, no, sometimes these things are cool to experience with others. And at the halfway mark, I waited an hour, I think, for him to arrive, and I made the conscious decision from then on to help him get to the end, and we literally rode the rest of the race together. And one of the best experiences I've had crossing the line with him.
I bet.
Sort of holding each other's hands as we crossed the line. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And do you think that the bodybuilding helped with your cycling and your running back then?
Made me, my legs were, my legs are pretty chunky and strong, but and they don't seem to lose it, which is a bit annoying, which is a bit of a hindrance to some degree. But I think so. I mean, like I think of the marathons. My first marathon was 3:17, and I haven't done one slower than that, other than when I'm pacing for someone. And and I think, and I've never really done anything like, even my worst 10K in a race is like 42 minutes or something. And I think obviously got a bit of power there from those bodybuilding days, and now with all the running I've done, I just the base has stayed, and it allows me to sort of come back. It still hurts a bit, but to come back and do things. So so that was pretty cool. And
cool. So let's fast forward. So you've done your first 100K race, which hurt.
Yep.
And you realize you need to actually train on hills and trails to be good at that.
Yep.
You did Boston.
Yep. Then
what? So you start training for your first miler. What come after Black Hole?
So Boston 2015. I'm pretty certain at that point I probably signed up to do the Great North Walk.
Yeah.
I'm pretty certain. Hang on, no. I did the Glasshouse Miler first.
Yeah.
I wanted to do one that was close to home, and it was 160k just up the road from my place, and the course was about 3,000 meters. So I thought, relatively flat, considering what else was out there. And I think that would have been 2015, and so I went up and I did that. Really nervous, I can remember, because it would be the first race that I would have to go through the night. Never done that before. I don't think I even trained in the night before.
And you wouldn't have a crew, or you didn't really know anyone then, did you?
It was solo. I didn't know you. Well, I just met you guys, because I can remember seeing some of the boys afterwards when I was flaked out on the ground and they were coming in. I think they did a 50k event or something. Anyway. So I did the Glass House, and that really, I can remember mentally it was tough. I remember though I was lucky. I bumped into a couple of guys, a fellow by the name of Adrian. I ran with him for ages, and he is one of my really good friends now. I see him at a lot of ultra events, a bit like the Black Hall. I've made so many friends, and I see them. It's a little cult in this ultra running world, and I see them time and time again. But I did that, and the last, I can remember from, the first 100k I was pretty happy with. I ran that in about 13 hours, and then I did the next 60 in about the same time. And I ended up having to walk the last 4 hours because I just sort of injured myself, but I'm sort of not one to give up, and so I just walked it in and managed to finish in 25 hours, and then
and did you know then that this was something you really wanted to do?
Oh, I think at that point I just went, okay, I wanted to do the harder ones, and then for me, I started searching them all up in Australia, and at that time, there was plenty around, but the ones that you see now, like GSA and DU, they weren't out at that point, and they're more recent. But I looked up, and Great North Walk or the Alpine Challenge, I think, if I remember rightly, were the two I was thinking. Alpine Challenge scared me a little bit because there's always potential for snow and stuff down there. So
I bet you it wouldn't scare you so much now.
No. But, so I picked the Great North Walk and down in Newcastle, and they rated that as one of the hardest ones around, and because there's no trail markings either, other than the permanent markers, and so I went down there and I had a blast. It was the first time I had a crew, and one of my work colleagues came down, and he'd never crewed before, and so we sort of learnt together, and it was so cool to have people helping me out, and so we did the Great North Walk, and that I actually think the Great North Walk was probably the one that made me want to do it this way, you know, to become my life. And because I remember finishing on Patonga Beach, I couldn't think of a better place to finish a long event. And as everyone does, kiss the pole down there at the bollard or whatever it is. And I remember just thinking, wow, I can't believe I just did that. And I didn't feel too bad either. Like, I mean, the last hour I was in the hurt locker, but that always happens.
Yes.
And, so then from then on, it was like open slather. I was looking for the hardest races in Australia to do, and I think I did it pretty progressively. I didn't, you know, just go and jump to some of these crazy ones, but
you did just jump to a 100k trail race for your first one.
Well, I did that, yeah, and I suppose I did go from there to GNW. I had my sights. I think GSA was first coming out, and it was touted to be the hardest event in Australia, and that was enough to intrigue me. And I had to finish GNW to qualify for GSA, and so as soon as I got the GNW, I was in for GSA, and today to this day, GSA's probably been the most painful event I've ever done because of the rain and all the wet feet. But
and so you went from kind of training on your own, fire roads out the back of Dayboro there, to, well, I've been on some of your training runs and they aren't fire roads.
No.
So walk us through, like, how do you find the stuff that you train on, and do you do bush bashing, and do you...
Yeah, so I suppose when I first started, I was nervous about being on the trails on my own, you know, always concerned about safety and things like that. So at first I just stuck to the fire trails, and then but then when I started doing, I think probably G&W probably made me realise, well, you know, you need to start doing single tracks and things, getting off the fire trails. So what I would do is I would look up Strava and look up segments. And
I'm pretty sure you took us on a lot that weren't segments.
No, that's true. But I'd look to see where people had run, and I'm thinking if people have been there before, then it's probably okay. Although sometimes I must admit, when you see only 2 people registered going down there, I'm thinking maybe that's a bit dicey. But in the end, so that's how I started going and exploring other trails. And you know, some of these horse trails or single track with, you know, overgrown and that, they actually led me to some pretty cool places. You know, I think of Diana's Bath, which is out the back of Dayboro, a really pretty place, and amongst other things. And I started to think myself, wow, you know, if you start really exploring, you can see stuff that most people don't see. And so in the end, it went from fire trails to actually not really wanting to run on fire trails, and actually trying to map every trail I could out there, and not even being afraid anymore. Like I went off Strava and started looking up some of the hiking maps and things, and I'd pick trails that weren't even on Strava, and just to see what they were there. And you know, sometimes you get there and you go, where's the trail? And as you've seen, I've taken you on some where they're well overgrown, and sometimes I've actually got to the point where I actually run out of trail, and I've had to pull the phone out.
Oh, I've been there many times.
Yeah.
I think running down creek beds, going, where's the trail?
I'd pull out the phone and I'd say, there's a trail up there, but we're going to bush bash to get to it. And so I've done that a few times, and probably the classic one was I took one of our running club members out to the Mount Glorious, and someone had done this trail down in the Northbrook Gorge, and I thought, I'm going to try and follow their footsteps. Well, I lost their footsteps pretty quickly. And in the end, we ended up walking over Lantana, and which scratches your legs up good. And I was loving it. It was a bit of fun for me, but poor old Jody, he was running late for a family thing.
He
wasn't happy. We were like an hour late, and I think I was in his bad books for a long time, and he still makes joke of it.
Yeah.
And,
which relates to this whole G rating. So in our running club, we have this G rating, which is the guy rating on how hard a trail is going to be.
Yeah.
G1 is basically fire roads, and it goes all the way. G10 is you can't finish it.
Yeah.
So I think I've experienced probably some G8s, but you've actually experienced one G10. Did you want to talk to us about where you actually couldn't physically finish that run?
The G10.
Down at Mount Barney.
Down at Mount... Oh, yeah, that one, yeah. So, Yeah, so I loved doing crazy adventures, and this one was and Mount Barney is one of my favourite areas to run. Unfortunately, it's 2 hours away, but every chance I get, I go down there. And so the idea of this one is I can't think of what I was training for. Probably just trying to train for some of the recent stuff, and I was going to go up Mount Barney, then down into the Rum Jungle, and then up the West Peak, which not many people do. And then I was going to go down the gorge to the lower portals, and halfway down the gorge, I'd read somewhere on a post somewhere that there'd been a massive landslip down in there, and getting through was really difficult. And but I thought, nah, can't be that bad. Anyway, I get down there, and sure enough, a whole side of where the track, well, there's no track down through the gorge. It's just bush bashing, and you're sort of rock hopping down a waterfall for a couple of k, and the whole side had gone. But I didn't want to go backtrack up the mountain. I wanted to find a way through. And I remember it's probably the scariest time, and the most scaredest I've been in trail running. I'm sort of shimmying across like I'll call it a cliff, but like about a 20-meter drop, and I can remember my heart rate going through the roof, just thinking, if I fall down in here, there's no phone reception, no one will know where I am, So, but anyway, I managed to shimmy past this drop and get through, and made it down to the lower portals, which was, spectacular. And I rock hopped through there for a while, and then I decided not to trust my map on my watch. I preloaded a map in my watch to try and help me not get lost, because it was a bit of off trail here, and it just didn't make sense to me. I came to a fork in the river, because I was sort of rock hopping down the river, and I thought, nah, I'm not meant to go that way. So I just followed my instinct, which was wrong, and I went left instead of right. And then it just seemed to be getting further and further away. I was getting close to another mountain called Mount Maroon, and that didn't make sense to me.
And you were running out of water. It was hot.
Yeah, it was like, by then it was like 37 degrees in the middle of the day, and the run had taken me an hour or two longer than I expected. I ran out of water, and then I managed to jump into a cow paddock, landed in a cow paddock. There was no phone reception either, so I couldn't even refer to my phone to see where I was exactly. But I knew I was in the wrong spot, and anyway, I managed to get to this farmer's cow paddock, which sort of made me think, okay, there can't be a house too far away. And anyway, phone reception came in. First I sent a message to my wife to let her know I'm going to be late. Shit's gone bad. And,
but you're still okay?
Yeah, still okay. And I find my way out, and I managed to get reception, and I could see the trail was about half a k away through some bush. So I just, like I do in other experiences, I just literally beelined it through the bush, and I ran into the path or into the trail. But then by then I was well out of water and about 7 k's back to the car. And it's first time I actually waved down car. Like I took the easy route home from there. I was tired and done, and I ran up the dirt road. And fortunately, a number of passers-by, I waved them down, and they shared their water with me. And then 2 k's from the finish, I could barely walk because I was fully cramped up. And these really nice people pulled up in their nice Pajero. I remember it well. And they said, "Do you need some help?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just trying to get to my car at Yellow Pinch." And they said, "Do you want a lift?" I said, "Look at me, I'm dirty, sweaty, stinky mess. Don't worry, just jump in, mate." And they let me get in their car. I think, God, I must have left a stench in there, but they drove me back. So that was probably the most craziest experiences I've had. But I look back on it with fondness. Actually, it was quite fun too, So fun in parts, and a good experience, and I always now look at it, I've got another one planned for down that area, which is probably a little bit more gnarlier and a little bit more adventurous and maybe optimistic on my part.
More adventurous than climbing along the side of a cliff.
Yeah. So we'll require some navigation and things, and it will probably require an overnighter as well. So it's I got something. I haven't shared that one with you yet, Christy, but I've got a pretty good idea of what I want to do, and I think it might be one of the first times someone might have attempted something like that. Yeah. So I'll talk about that later if you're interested.
And that's I guess that just goes to show your mental toughness to be able to go through stuff like that. And I know you do that in training a lot. You do some, well, whatever you call weird, but you know, some of the training things you do, so you go down and hit the trails, which is understandable when you're training for a trail race. But you would also do things like 80 King Street hill reps. Now, for those of you who don't know, King Street's about the only hill there is in the Red Cliff Peninsula, and what is it, about 30 meters?
It's not even 30, it's 15 meters elevation gain.
And he'd go and do 80 reps of this thing. And it's probably not for the physical strength of it, but just to mentally mess with your head.
Yeah, and I do quite a few of those from time to time, and I only do it for that reason. One, it's hard doing repeats. Like, you can climb a hill once, that's okay, or maybe twice, but you know, when you're doing it endless amounts of time, I think, well, if I can put up with that, then, you know, I should be able to put up with anything that a race can throw at me. And King Street is easy, accessible from home. And yeah, just in the lead up to Down Under this year, I did go there with the aim. Well, I actually went there to do 100, but I got 3 hours in at 80, and I was, you know, that was enough. And so I like doing that, you know, and I've done similar things on trails. You know, I used to go out to Mount Sampson, and that's a 300 meter climb, and I've done that most I've done that's 9 times, which is pretty mental when you do it. And gone to Kokoda, I've done that 20 times. It's a really steep little pinch, and yeah, it's I mean, it's a good way to get elevation, but I don't do it. I do it for that, but the main thing is to try to get the brain trained not to stop, and not to give up.
Yeah, or the one time you did a marathon around Shorncliffe Sandgate, hit every single road.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell people about your little what you tried to do,
Yeah.
what you did do on Redcliffe? And
yeah, so that's I suppose I can't, you know, there's a lot of runners out there, hey, and everyone's different, that like to just run the same route all the time, and I used to be that person until I fell in love with trails and things. And anyway, the trails are a long way from home, so I thought, how can I mix it up a little bit? And so I just started running every street in Redcliffe and Sandgate, and slowly but surely I have actually ticked every single street off in the Redcliffe Peninsula, and now quite far beyond. And but on this particular day with you, Christy, and others, we were down at Shorncliffe, and yeah, I actually had no plans. I think I decided that week I might run a marathon this weekend. And not do that, not just run a marathon, you know, I might just run every street in Shorncliffe, you know, and I put it out there, and yourself and a few others come and join me for parts of it. And yeah, literally at 4 a.m. I think I started, and I'm running down back streets, and I can still remember some old folk out watering their lawns at some ungodly hour down like a street. They're probably thinking, who's this crook running down our street? Because yeah, you do get some strange looks when you run down cul-de-sacs and things. It's like they don't normally see runners come down their way, and I try and allay their fears by saying hello and that. But and that's sort of become another little side obsession of mine, is just to slowly tick off more streets. I haven't really done much in the last couple of months, but I have plans to go back and spread the Schweitzer web, as I call it, across the thing and across the whole area. So it's a bit of, well, and that's, once again, that's just to keep it interesting, you know. Yeah, I just don't like doing the same thing over and over again, except for when I'm doing repeats, trying to train the brain.
Yeah, chainsaw repeats in the middle of summer here.
Yeah, I've got chainsaw as well, and you know, there's so many of them. I forget what you know, some of the things that we've done, you know, and you know, we've gone to some crazy places. You know, I said before about some of the things with Strava. Well, obviously, I love to go to places where they aren't on Strava now, and we've created our own segments out there on quite a few where no one had been really before, and we've found some pretty gnarly stuff out there, but I just think that, you know, the good thing about that is it's, you know, it's rare that I go to a race now and I think, I haven't seen this before. This is not new, you know. Down Under threw some new stuff at me, but on the whole, even Down Under, whilst it's really gnarly, you know, we'd done a lot of that in training already. So
And I think that's really important when you come to a hill or you come to a really gnarly bit that you just go, yeah, I've done this before. Doesn't freak you out or.
And that's the thing, it's just sort of was an evolution. When I was running marathons, I avoided hills like the plague, hated them because it would affect my pace. But once I realised that with trails, pace wasn't necessarily as important. Well, I mean, it is, but the ability to climb fast was more important. So my training after that after marathon training went from trying to hit a certain pace consistently, went from that to chasing elevation and different types of elevation. Sometimes I'd come home, we'd done 4 hours and we've done 15k. I'd look at it and I'd go, that's terrible. But, in the same time frame, we might have done 2,000 meters as well, So I totally didn't care about time anymore. And just looking for the steepest, gnarliest trails and just having a good time out there, And
like Mount Blaine, that was a good one.
Yeah, so Mount Blaine. Wow. And this is pretty much the story of, some of the things we've done. We actually went down to run up Mount Flinders, which is pretty gnarly on its own, It's a rocky outcrop thing. But then we decided to head north actually. And we just looked at this trail that said, there's a trail up there. And literally in a split second, we decided, yeah, let's go do that. And, well, no one clearly goes up there very often. And it was literally just... like I led the way because I think I must have said let's go that, and you guys just sat behind. And anyway, the memory of that is just human-sized spiders.
Man-eating spiders.
Because I had to run. I picked up a stick. There was that many spiders. Not only spiders, but they were all like super-sized. Or fully grown anyway, and that told me no one clearly comes here. No.
And there was no trail really. It was bush bashing.
And I just say, yep, keep coming. You can get through here. Anyway, I was running with a stick in front of my face because I was too busy looking at my feet to see where I could tread. But then there's spiders at face height, and that was I had a big spider land on me back, and I jumped around like an idiot when it happened, but at the end it was pretty fun too, and so I mean I just love doing that, and once again, knowing that we've gone up Mount Blaine, it's a tiny little mountain in the back of nowhere, but not many people get to do it, and that's what I like about doing those things. So that was pretty cool.
And you don't. For someone who does milers and DU 135 and the 200 mile that you recently did, you actually don't train that much. And and that's not an insult, but you're not out doing 150k a week.
No, the only time I really had a structured training program was training for Boston and qualifying for Boston. I had a really rigid program and I stuck to it.
Yeah,
didn't miss a single day, whether it was rain, hail, or shine. Then after that, I suppose after a while, I probably had a training program for my first 100 in not my first 100k, maybe 100 mile in mind. But after a while, I just sort of just do it on instinct, I know how much elevation I want to do in a week. Distance really doesn't matter. So I just have this, and I know when to space them out. But yeah, I mean, I actually trained more distance for Boston per week. I got up to probably peaked max at about 105k a week. I did more Ks than I did leading into Down Under 135 this year, where really my week would rarely get above 80k. And
except for when you did the Buffalo Grand Slam as a training run for DU 135.
Well, that was my last big weekend, 3 weeks out from Down Under. And so I suppose you got to be I mean, that's an example, I suppose. I don't like going out and running 60k in the bush on my own. That gets a bit monotonous. But if I can make it an event like we did there, we went down and did the Buffalo Stampede 3 weeks out from Down Under, and that was actually one of my best trail experiences in terms of how well I went and felt. I did that, and I did the same for GISA as well. I did. In the lead up to GISA, for the first time there, I did a 50k event. I did the Hounslow, which was brutal. Highly recommend it. 68k event, and also did the 100k at the Glass House, all within. And then I did the GISA, and I did that all within 7 weeks. And
your body just doesn't seem to break down, does it?
No, I was really surprised. I don't know why I did that. I think it was just see if I can do it, and so all of those events became training runs effectively for GISA. And
you realise that for most of us, that's like the event we pick for the year.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, I guess I've come to the mindset, like, people ask me for advice on things, and I said, don't listen to me, because I don't really follow the rules.
You don't have a coach?
No.
No.
I just, if I like the look of an event, I don't normally even think, is it too close to another event? I'll just say, oh, I just want to do that, and I'll do it, And, this year, like, I've done the 200 mile, I did the Buffalo, I did the Down Under, and not too long I'll do a last man standing type event. It'll be a bit more fun for that one. But, I don't think about the year ahead necessarily, that I'm going to make sure I can't have this certain gap. Not interested, because I'm not there to win. I'm there to grit it out and finish, and just go and do some amazing experiences. All of those races, I pick them for the scenery. You could never see me run around a track for 24 hours. I would be done after an hour. And like all of the runs that I've done are in awesome locations. And the run, like, I even think of next year, there's some cool ones I'm looking at next year, and I'm going because of the scenery, the people that I know are going to be there, and I get to share it with, and the experience, and for me, that's why I love it so much. And but I also love the challenge. I love, to do 4 massive events in 7 weeks. I do like that. That's something that most people won't do as well. I like I like the look on people's faces when they go, "How do you do that?" And I just you got to do it. But I met Gene Dykes at the 200 miler, and I thought I did some crazy things, but he's 70 odd or something, and he makes my outings look pretty tame. He has a very similar philosophy. How do you know if you don't give it a go? And it's exactly right. So
absolutely.
I hope I can still do it when I'm 70 as well.
Yeah. So tell me, I want to talk a little bit about your actual races, because I've crewed for you now, I think 3 or 4 times on some of your hardest events. And I know that you go through phases. There's definitely some big rough patches out there, but what goes through your brain? I've never seen you in a state where I've even had to convince you you're going to do this, Guy. So as grumpy as you might get, or as, dragging your poles along the path you might get, I've never ever seen even a moment of I'm done. Has that happened to you out there? Or?
Yeah, it has. Only once. It happened to me, strangely enough, on a relatively easy run. It was my second go, I think. My second go at Blackhall 100. It was a really hot day, and I was actually going there to sort of run. I can't remember. I think I wanted to do it in under 12 hours or something like that. So I was sort of running reasonably hard for me. I know that's not a breakneck speed for some, but for what I do, that's where I'm at. And so I ran pretty hard for about 50k, and but after the 50k, I had to do this big climb out of Karelpa, I think it was, and a big climb. The sun was just couldn't avoid the sun on this fire trail, and literally in 5 to 10 k's, my mind had gone from having a good time to having a really, really bad time. And I actually went into the aid station at 60-something kilometre mark, and I'd already convinced myself I was going home and having a beer. No, I'm not lying. That's exactly how my mind was. I'd actually just given up. I wasn't injured or anything. I was just mentally done and not enjoying it anymore. It was too hot. And I got into the aid station, told them I'm done, and they looked at me and they go, "What's wrong?" I just said, "I'm done." And Alan Gwynn Davies was there, and he's pretty well known in the Brisbane area for ultra running, and he looked at me, he goes, "I've seen worse people than you." And I said, "No, I'm done, mate." And he said, all right, we'll just put you down on this stretcher. And he put me down on a stretcher, and I just thought, yeah, whatever, man, I'm going home. And he gave me some Coke, and I just sat there, and I started collecting my thoughts, and I started to think, I've never had a DNF before. Why am I letting this creep into my thinking right now? And he came over to me, Alan. I think it was about an hour later. I already knew by then, before he come and visited me, I was sort of dreading him coming visit me, because I started to feel the guilts kick in. I can finish this, but I needed someone to tell me to go. And so Alan came over and he looked at me and goes, "You're feeling better, aren't you?" And I said, "Yep." And he just said, "Get the F up and go." And I did, and I must admit that experience, I remember finishing and getting the cool little trophy that they give you there, and I remember thinking how angry with myself I would have been had I let myself quit, and had Alan not let me quit, and I suppose what it taught me then and there was that even when you're in your worst state, as I probably was then, although I must admit I've been in worse states, I don't get what happened then, but
you didn't have an awesome crew with you, maybe.
Yeah, maybe I was running solo, but I made me realise, even when you're on these long events, if you're having a really bad time, just stop for an hour, and you can get out of it, and so since then I don't think I've ever. Well, that would be the only time. Every other race I've ever done, I've never thought of quitting, and I don't know how to explain it in my head, but I mean, I've never had a DNF, so, and now that is almost like an overriding factor with me, because I don't want to break that personal record, I suppose, and so even when I'm hurting as much as you heard out there and tired and thinking, why am I going for a third night, as I did in Delirious, there's always some little spark in my brain, I guess, that says, you're better off putting up with this for another 24 hours, 12 hours, whatever it is, than having to explain to people why you quit. And most people don't understand the long events. They want to know why you quit, to the average person, I suppose, that doesn't do this sort of stuff. And I'd rather just put up with the crap for the next 12 hours or 24 hours and have the opposite conversation where they think, man, you're crazy, and so I honestly cannot see myself quitting any races unless I get injured or really, really sick.
Or get cut off.
Or get cut off, which
DU 135, that is a tough event to get under the time.
And it's an interesting one. That's as close as I've ever been to not finishing, was DU in the first year. I was within half an hour of cut off, and it was chasing me for 12 hours, and it was actually kind of fun, because it was like I'd never had sweepers right behind me before. And,
you didn't have time to think, did you? You just had to go.
And it was like, I was always doing the maths in my head, and how much time I had, and I thought I had more time than I did, but the adrenaline rush of knowing that I may not make it was pretty cool, and I actually, for the first time, I knew I was going to be the last finisher, because I knew everyone behind me had got cut, and so I was actually really looking forward to the finish, because I figured, I've seen events where the last finisher comes in and usually there's a big crowd, and that sort of half excited me. I thought, this is pretty cool. I'm going to be the last finisher this time, and not realising, I knew in my mind I felt like I had it under control, but not realising that everyone that was watching on the computer, watching the dot, was starting to think that I wasn't going to make it, and in the end it got a bit tight, but it's probably one of my funnest finishes in terms of... it was painful, but I really enjoyed the adrenaline that chasing cutoff was giving me.
So then you decide to go back for a second year.
Yeah.
The first time wasn't enough to finish one of the toughest events, if not the toughest event in Australia. So you decide to go back a second year.
Yeah, the guys down there run a really cool event. It's a low-key type of event, and I think in my mind it was the hardest event, and I still think, it and GISA, they're hard, and they're probably the two hardest events that I've done in Australia, and would probably be the hardest, although there's other events I haven't done, but I don't think they're as hard. But anyway, DU in terms of gnarliness and time cut-offs, I think is the hardest, and I thought it would be pretty cool to say that you've done it twice, and I actually decided I wanted to go and do it a bit quicker this time. I felt like I was in better shape. I thought I might be able to do it in 50 hours, and I ended up doing it about an hour quicker than last year, and so it was much more in control this time, and knowing the course a little bit, I didn't get anywhere near as grumpy this time. Last year I got really grumpy in parts because they were sending us off trail through crazy bush, and I remember swearing, who the F designs courses like this, Tom Cullen and Dale down there, and I should have just appreciated and enjoyed what I was doing, but at times it was just like, man, this is just crazy, and I think that craziness and the difficultiness of finishing it was what made me go back this year. And this year, when I was going off trail, because I had you guys coming with me, I actually really looked forward to seeing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you were giggling at different points when you're like, look where we get to go, Christy.
So it was a really strange experience this time, because I really enjoyed watching, because I knew what was coming. I knew how I felt last year, and it was really cool to see yours and the other guys' reaction when they saw what I saw.
Yeah.
And
it is, I have to say, it pushed me, and I've done some bush bashing with you. There's this one section, it was raining, we're at the top of this mountain, and you literally see this arrow that goes straight down. You can see the checkpoint, and Guy was yelling at me, "Are you coming, Christy?" Because he was going faster, and I fell, I don't know how many times going down there. It's just bush bashing and rocks, and you're kind of running to grab onto a tree, and it was dark. It's crazy. That race is, and the parts that I saw were insane.
Yeah, it's so, it put on a really cool event there, and I must admit my mindset this time was so much clearer than last year, and I actually think this will be the Down Under, despite its hard difficultiness, and it rained this year. It was it was uncomfortable in parts, but it's probably in my mind the first race in a long time, maybe Buffalo, but Buffalo's shorter, that you didn't know, and we haven't really talked about it, but I do get quite grumpy out there, and at times, and particularly in the early hours of the morning, and this was the first event where I really didn't get into that state. I only did on the very last few hours going through the old river, and that was because just sheer frustration of how slippery it was, because it was raining, and the rocks were like walking on ice, and I hit the ground a few times quite hard, and it's a 10k slog on slippery rocks. It was, by the end of that I was done, and but other than that, in my mind, I thoroughly enjoyed it this year, and I might even go back for a third time.
After you finish, you said there is no way I'm coming back to this. And
no, but then to be a third time finisher would be pretty cool as well. And then where does it stop, I suppose? But I really like the event that the guys put on, and they really are down to earth guys, and really I don't know, they just get involved with you and get to know the people that are doing it, and the same finishers from the year I finished, nearly all of them went back this year.
Yeah. And
we nearly all finished again this year. It was cool to see those guys again, and I suspect some of them will be back there again for the third time.
See if they can. Well, there's only 4 of you who have done it, finished it twice, so we'll see how many go back next year to try and get 3 times. Yeah,
there's a couple on that list that I think will go back, and it just it's just cool to see those guys, and it would be cool to. It's one of those races where you really appreciate everyone that finishes it. Not that I don't do that on other races, but knowing how hard that one is, it's really cool to celebrate those that make it. So because it is hard out there.
Yeah, it is. And so you're going back to Delirious again, the 200 mile?
Yeah, signed up for that. Sean Kessler runs that. He is a top bloke.
Oh, so much fun, that race.
And to be honest, the atmosphere he created over there is what drew me back to that. Like, the race is amazing anyway, the scenery and everything. And I really enjoy it. Just so different to what's on the East Coast.
And you got to do a kayak, you got to do a ferry ride, if you call it that, which was a little tinny.
Ferry ride in a tinny at like 100 miles an hour. So But and then walk through the mud to get out. But it's just some of the uniqueness, and on that southern coastline of WA is just spectacular, and 350 odd Ks, and got there was some pretty cool people did that event, like Gene Dykes was there, and Candice Burt from America, and a couple of other pretty amazing people, and so it's pretty cool, and Sean is just a true Aussie, and he had a party afterwards, and he made a real point of letting everyone know who was running at the night before the event, and also telling people about what they'd done, and so that was pretty cool to learn about the other runners, and so I literally signed up straight away for that again. I really want to go and have that same experience. I'm sure it'll be different second time round, and so that's the only one I've locked in for next year at this stage.
So where do you go from here? Okay, you might go back to DU 135 for a third attempt at finishing, and you got Delirious, but
yeah, look, it's I don't really know. I mean, Sean's got a couple of new races coming out, which another couple of 200 milers, which I'll probably have a go at those. Down under, I haven't. If I'm half considering it now, if it fits in my calendar, I'll be there. But I'm sort of, there's not many other races in Australia that I really want to do at this point. So I've actually started thinking, there's ones overseas for sure, but with family and running a business is pretty hectic. So getting away for those is pretty difficult. But I'm actually sort of starting to think of my own stuff, and around here, and I mentioned before that around Mount Barney, there's some pretty cool scenery in the scenic rim, and there's a lot of cool places in that area which I have not been to, and I've got a thought there of maybe linking a lot of the peaks up in a single run, and finish at Mount Barney or something like that.
Be pretty awesome.
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool, and try and time it that you finish Mount Barney, hopefully in a nice time in the day, so it could be pretty cool to stop up on the top there and just take it all in, because it's pretty awesome view up there. And
in winter when it's a bit cooler.
Yeah. And so I want to do something like that, and I've even had a random idea of running from the Sunshine Coast to the Gold Coast, but not the easy way.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you sent a map through to us with about 300 and some kilometres.
Yeah, it's about a 200 miler, but same thing. Maybe taking all the Glasshouse Mountains and taking a bunch of the similar peaks that you find out in the scenic rim as well. Just random stuff like that. The hardest thing when you're doing something like that is trying to work out how to get from A to B, because there's civilization smack bang in the middle of it. So there's probably can't avoid some streets in parts like Ipswich and that. But I suppose for me, I think that's probably where I'll go next. Just try and do stuff that is similar to the races, but there's not a race there, and maybe a lot more off trail, and a bit of navigation required, just to really test that side of things, and
get you ready for Barclays or something.
No,
right?
yeah, I mean that'd be pretty cool to go over there, but it's pretty hard to get in these days, and I'd need to do a lot of navigational training. I mean, most of the people that you see some pretty fast people go there, way more qualified than I am, and they don't even get a loop done,
Yeah,
so
they don't have their phones and their GPS watches with maps, and
I think that's what is why most of those guys don't make it. Yet you see some, some of the most recent finishers, no one knew who they were before they finished, but very obviously pretty good navigators and strong of mind, and they get through. And I suppose that's sort of the attraction. I sort of think, well, I know I'm pretty strong of mind, but I can't navigate, so I'd need to learn that.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that's, I don't know, later.
Yeah. We'll see what happens over the next few years, hey?
Yeah. So.
Well, look, all the best for all your races coming up, and you got Last Man Standing. That will be a bit of a fun one in August, I believe that is.
It is, yeah. Yeah, no, it's a same concept that Laz sort of came up with over in America, and it's now spread across the
Yeah.
world. And Alan Gwynn Davies is running that, and I thought, well, I'll have a go at it. I mean, I'm not going there. There's some pretty cool runners going to that one, track runners and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to go there just to have that experience.
Hmm.
It'll be my first DNF, no doubt, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And I just want to go and experience that event where you toe the line with some pretty cool people every hour, and just see how long I can stay with them.
Yeah.
And if I get 10 laps, I'll be happy. If I get 20, I'll be stoked. It'd be cool to get 100 miles out of it, but I'm realistic. Yeah, I think that might be a bit difficult at this
See
point.
how you go. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Guy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Christy, for having me on.
All right. See ya.
See ya.